And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather is showing low pressure here south of the Kenai Peninsula, pushing a front in toward the southeast coast with an increasing chance of rain late tonight. Showers over the interior, snow, blowing snow, eastern Arctic coast down into the passes of central eastern Brooks Range. And then for tomorrow, pretty quiet out here over the Bering Sea with high pressure. Some scattered showers over the southeast Bering to the Alaska Peninsula. Cold and snowy for the Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast, and rain for the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast. Cloudy, cool, and showery here across southern Alaska. And for the Sunday outlook, about the same for southern Alaska. Light winds, but partly to mostly cloudy, or mostly cloudy to cloudy, with areas of shower, especially in the afternoon, especially over the eastern Alaska Range, Copper River Basin down to the North Gulf Coast. And rain trending toward more showery conditions for the Panhandle. Out to the west, next system pushing some precipitation and wind into the central Aleutians. Coastal water forecast for the Panhandle on the south coast there, south to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, east-southeast 20 knots for the central coast, and not too much different for the north coast here, east winds 20 to 25 knots. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, Stevens Passage look for south winds at 15 tomorrow. Small craft advisories for Clarence Strait south at 25 knots. Outlook for Sunday. South coast, south to southeast winds 15 knots, central coast east-southeast at about 15 to 20 knots, and up to the north, winds will be east at 15 knots. Light northeast breeze at 10 knots for Lynn Canal, and light easterlies at 10 knots for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Eastern North Gulf Coast, east winds 20 knots tomorrow for Prince William Sound, northeast at 15, seas at about 3 feet. Northeast at 20 knots, western North Gulf Coast, Cook Inlet, north to northeast breezes at 10 knots, seas 2 to 3 feet, and Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, northwest winds at 15. And for the day on Sunday, Kamishak Bay, light variable winds on Sunday and into the afternoon. Otherwise, Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast, winds will be northeast at 15 knots. Cook Inlet, southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, seas 3 feet. Light variable winds for Prince William Sound for the day on Sunday, and east winds at 15 for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Kodiak Island, variable to northwest winds at 10 to 15 knots tomorrow. And the Alaska Peninsula here, west northwesterlies at 20 to 25, west at 15 for Bristol Bay. Outlook for Sunday, Alaska Peninsula, west northwesterlies at 20 to 25 knots, and west 25 for Bristol Bay. Variable winds at 10 knots for Shelikof Strait. Excuse me. And north winds at 15 knots for the east side of Kodiak. Excuse me again. Eastern Aleutians, northwest winds 20 to 30 knots, seas 8 to 11 feet. Northwest 15 for Adak and Atka. And then east winds here becoming southeast there from Kiska to Shimei at 25 knots. And the outlook for Sunday, small craft advisories here from Amchitka Island to Shimei for south to southeast winds at 15 or 25 to 30 knots. Pardon me. And east southeast 15 for Adak and Atka, and west to northwest winds at 20 to 30 knots there for the eastern Aleutians. For the southwest coast, north to northwest winds tomorrow 20 to 25 knots. Northwest to 20 for St. Lawrence Island. Pribilofs, northwest winds 25 knots, seas 10 feet. And for the day on Sunday, Pribilof Islands, St. Matthew Island, northwest at 20, north winds 20 knots, Yukon Delta Coast, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island. Small craft advisories there for the Kuskokwim Delta Coast for northwest winds at 25 knots. And for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, north or northwest winds at about 15 knots. North of 20 for the western Arctic coast, and then small craft advisories for the Chukchi Sea with north to northeast winds at 25 knots and seas running in the ice-free waters up to 5 feet. And for Sunday, north winds 20 knots there for the Chukchi Sea, western Arctic coast, northeast winds at 10 to 20 knots for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast.